Good morning, everyone. Let me just get my talk fired up for you here. I'm so excited to be here for the 2020 Empire State Maker Faire. Wish I were seeing your lovely faces, but still, I couldn't be more glad than to share our story with you. So what I'll be talking about today is what we've learned from 12,000 masks, the 12,000 masks that we've made since we began in April of 2020. My name is Michael Kelly.
Welcome back. Thanks for sticking around. There's a lot.
Oh, the Maker Monkey, I think, jumped in for a second there. Hopefully I'm starting on time. My name is Michael Kelly. I am the principal and co-founder. Let me just double check here. I'm the principal and co-founder of Rochester Refugee Sewing and Repair, and I'm also an adjunct professor of industrial design and graphic design at the Rochester Institute of Technology here in Rochester, New York. I have kind of a broad background as a maker. My training or my education are in human factors and ergonomics, design research, product development, but also I have some broader experience. Industrial sewing, fine woodworking, pottery, embroidery, glass blowing, soldering, but only the first time that I ever soldered anything or played with electronics at all was actually at my first Maker Faire. So to all of you who are watching this and experiencing your first Maker Faire and for the first time getting to hear and see all the interesting things that people do, that is so wonderful. And to your families and friends that brought you here, you should thank them, and I thank them for making this experience broader and letting everyone experience how wonderful it is to understand how things work and why they work and how things come together. Now, I'm sure that many of you in the audience can identify with this. People who are creative, we tend to want to start and try all sorts of different things. And for the most part, I think that's absolutely fine and that's absolutely wonderful. Organizations like Maker Faire and the events that they put on are these fantastic opportunities to stretch ourselves and to grow. I will say, though, that there are times in your life when you need to focus more. And what you're going to hear about now is the result of my sort of focusing in and my organization sort of focusing in for the past 6 or 7 months to really get something done. I will have for you, I think, 15 different ideas that we've learned from these 12,000, I still can't believe the number, masks over the past 6 or 7 months. And the first one that I'd like to start you on is this. For many creatives, focus oscillates, narrowing in the long run and also broadening in the short run are both growth. I think when people get interested in a lot of things and they try and do a lot of things, it can be kind of a hair-pulling experience to understand where you are when you're trying something new, but also trying to develop an older skill set. And I like to think of focus in your life like this. There are times when it's going to be broad, when you're going to be learning and taking stuff in. And there are also going to be points where things really come together and you focus and you make progress in your life. And I think over the long run, those things tend to narrow. We tend to specialize and really start to care about what we discover matters most to us. And I just want to say that no matter where you are on your making journey and your making path, know that you are making progress. And I think, again, for many creative people, it can be a scary thing to think about making progress, especially when you have a really daunting task in front of you, or you're trying to do something really big. But just know that broadening in the short term and narrowing in the long term Both of those things are growth. So more broadly for a second, who are we? So I mentioned Rochester Refugee Sewing and Repair. That's my organization. We're part of Rochester Refugee Resettlement Services. Rochester Refugee Resettlement Services is an affordable housing provider, and we actually do quite a lot more than that for refugees who are resettled in Rochester, New York. Rochester is the third largest resettlement city in New York State, and New York State is the third largest resettlement state after California and New York. And our goal at Rochester Refugee, broadly speaking, is to help some of the newest and most vulnerable Americans thrive and adapt to life here in our community. What we found is that these people who come from some of the worst and most violent places, the most difficult to live places in the world, they also have the most to give when it comes to making the community an amazing place to live. There are barriers, though. There are barriers to success that refugees come up against. The two main issues that Rochester Refugee Sewing and Repair hopes to solve are the barriers to employment, which are transportation and English and cultural sensitivity. So for the most part, when refugees come to the US, it's difficult for them to have reliable access to transportation. So it's really important that we create good jobs that are walkable for these folks. The second thing that's rather difficult is the English and cultural sensitivity, the English language training, I should say, and the cultural sensitivity that refugees need. When they come to this country, they're not familiar with a lot of the systems and a lot of the things that we take for granted. And that can make it difficult for people to get proper healthcare. It can make it difficult for people to get real strong access to education. So what we decided is that we could make a business focused on making things that would serve as a vehicle to provide the type of service and the type of access that refugees and their families need in order to thrive. What we've become is a really interesting thing. As I mentioned, over the last 7 months, we've made about 12,000 masks. We started in April. Before that time, the most we had ever made of any one thing was about 800 scrunchies when we tried to launch it. And I'll tell you, scrunchies are a little bit simpler than most masks. We've shipped our masks to about 49 different states. I think we have only missed Alaska. I may be wrong about that. We've gone from 5 SKUs, or 5 different objects in stock, 5 objects that we make, to more than 20 objects that we make. We've grown our little tiny shop from 500 square feet to 1,500 square feet. And we've gone from 3 industrial machines, and a lot of home machines, but 3 industrial machines to 13 industrial machines. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is what we've learned as a result of that growth, and what we've learned as a result of the intensity that is, trying to make 12,000 of the same or similar object and trying to get them out during a really critical time when people really need them. This is not a business talk. I want you to think about this from the perspective of a maker. What I'm going to tell you about today is a lot about design, about sewing, and about community, about why making matters to me, about why making matters to the people who are in my life, and about why I like to share that with my community. If you're a maker who's thinking about turning something smaller into a business, or even somebody who's really interested in sewing and wants to grow that interest or develop that interest, this is also a really great talk for you, because I'm going to be giving some great advice, especially towards the end, about the where, what, when, how, and why of sewing in particular. So the second thing that I'll give you, and this might be kind of obvious after the beginning of the talk, is that making matters more with friends. Community takes many forms, and work in service of community is always better. Community can be your friends. Community can be your family. It can be your high school, your college. Community is any of the people who are around you. And if you've grown up or spent a lot of time enjoying understanding how and why things are made, you may kind of take that for granted. And you'll be surprised to know that a lot of people don't know how things are made. And a lot of people have, maybe never made something in their life. And they don't know what it's like to experience the joy of creation and the joy of understanding something new, something physical, something electronic. Sharing that joy is what really matters. And any form of sharing that joy, I think, is service to the community. But a bit of an interesting question as well, like, what is service? I think a lot of people have different ideas about what service can be. So the third thing that I'll say, and I really want to put this specifically in the terms of being a maker, service means helping others identify and achieve their own goals, both by listening and sharing your knowledge and experience. So especially as an adjunct professor at RIT, what I often find is that students really want a roadmap. But what we know as makers and as designers is that often when you want to achieve a goal, the roadmap isn't quite that obvious. So one thing that I think really matters when you think about service is helping people to understand what their goals are, and then helping them break down the path and the way to get there. I think it leads to a really fulfilling experience for both you and for the person who you're working with. I will also say that service of this kind, of course, you will learn more than you ever thought possible by teaching. And also it really is a very joyful thing to do. So I really encourage you, and again, I think the rest of this talk is going to be a little bit more practical, a little bit more focused on design and our experience, but I encourage you to think about service and think about your community when you are working on making whatever it is, whatever wonderful project you're cooking up. And just understand that service and community could be as simple as, sharing your project with a friend, sharing it on YouTube, sharing it on Discord, or sharing it in person, as time and safety allow. I will talk about masks. I do want to focus on masks. One thing that I didn't put in the talk, so this is maybe, there are probably about 200 masks in this photograph. This is our V3 mask. This is the third version of the mask that we designed. And they're bundled in groups of 10. Now, these bundles were very convenient when it came to counting, but I'm just going to add in a little bonus point here, which is don't ever have your packaging become an extra step or a barrier for your customer. The packaging in this case, while it was very convenient for us, it's tied with offcut strips of fabric, which is a fantastic use of offcut strips for fabric. Always keep them around. Use them to tie, use them to bundle. It's like tape in an industrial sewing shop. But the issue here is that, of course, they became very wrinkled, not as presentable as they should be, and maybe a little bit more of a headache for the customer. So this wasn't quite in there, but I did want to add that in. So the title of the talk, again, what we've learned from 12,000 masks, and specifically, I want to talk to you about what we've learned from making those masks. But there's a lot more that we've been thinking about over the course of the last 7 months. Of course, there's selling them, there's shipping them. That was absolutely insane. Ordering fabric, trimming them. You wouldn't think that trimming takes time. Of course, trimming takes time. Quality controlling, purchasing new machines, fixing the machines when they go down, teaching people how to make them, designing them and redesigning them. I told you that was version 3. I think we've gone through about 7 different versions, not counting prototypes and changing seam allowances, which is, we'll probably bring it up to 30 or 40 different masks that we've made, worrying about them, obsessing over them, and it turns into one very big oof. It is more than anyone can handle. I think 12,000 masks is more than any one person can handle. So the question is, if you're trying to achieve something large, how do you take that big oof and turn it into a slightly smaller oof? And this will bring me to my next point, which is to ask for help. Throughout this presentation, you'll see that my contact information is going to be across the bottom of every single slide. And I mean it genuinely when I say that the email that's down there goes directly to me. It actually goes to everyone in the shop, but I see every single one of them. And if you have any questions about sewing, design, best places to eat in Rochester, please feel free to shoot me an email. So why do I say ask for help? Well, you can tell that I'm very passionate about what I'm talking about today, or at least I hope you can. I'll add that passion is one that I've learned, not only from my own experience, but from the experiences of the people who taught me how to love this thing that I now do every day. So point number 4 is ask for help. Most people want to help, especially if they share your interests. Sometimes people will gladly help just because they like you or because they're your friends or all sorts of other stuff, or because you help them become interested in things. Everyone wants to see their passion live on. Sewing in the United States is a really interesting thing. In the late 80s, early 90s, most of the knowledge that we had grown in this country, starting in the 20s with some of the first industrial machines, and even slightly earlier than that in Europe, America really had an incredible wealth of sewing knowledge. And then in the pursuit of profit, we sent a lot of those jobs overseas and taught a lot of folks how to sew across the world. And what does that mean? That means the folks that did stick around, they've seen their profession and the knowledge of their profession slowly become drained from their community. So especially when it comes to sewing, people are so happy to share the information that helps this tradition, this set of tools, this profession live on. And it's been a truly inspiring thing for me. 3 of our biggest helps have been Field Techs, Hickey Freeman, and Adrian Jules. I've also met with a number of retired professionals who've worked for all of these companies and more. I can't thank these folks enough. The number of times that I've asked for a cone of thread, the number of times that I have asked how to design something, how to change a machine attachment, what should I buy, where should I go, who's a good supplier, all of these things. When I first started, I thought, wow, I know that sewing manufacturing is pretty competitive. It's going to be very, very hard for us to talk to all these people who are right in our backyard. I could not have been more wrong. So one thing that I'll recommend is for making 12,000 masks, if you're trying to do something such as that, ask for help. If you're interested, particularly if you're interested in starting a business, consider the professions which are smaller. Consider the professions and trades which don't get all of the attention. I found that because of that fact being applicable to sewing, this community is really welcoming. As opinionated as we all are about what machines are the best and what is the right way to do things. It has been a lovely and welcoming community. So to make 12,000 masks, definitely ask for help. The rest of today, I'm going to break down into kind of 3 sections. I'm going to be talking about the design, tools, and processes that we used. Design principles, tools, and processes that we used to make these 12,000 masks. First question I get from students a lot, or at least one of the things that I ask on the first day, is what is design? And I love this definition, and I'll always use this definition. It's something that I've worked out over the past 10 years or so. It's the process of finding out what decisions you can make. And through iteration and prototyping, very important, understanding the best answers to those questions. This is the squiggle, the Newman squiggle. It's a graphic that many people have used to describe design. Design is a gradual narrowing from an incredible period of exploration and not quite understanding. And then as you build the thing more, as you start to understand what decisions you can make, you end up at that final line. You end up with a focused point. What that means in terms of masks is after you sew for the first time, you realize, oh, like maybe my line is a little wavy. What happens if that's straighter? What happens if it's more curved? What happens if I change the distance between that line and the edge of the fabric? What happens if I make the ties out of this or out of that, or et cetera, et cetera? What happens if I add a pocket? What happens if this hem is a little bit bigger? The way that you'll get there is through making. 6, make a bad one out of bad materials first. Get over the hump and start learning quickly. My first mask that I made back in April is the one on the left of your screen. The proportions are all wrong. The fabric is hideous. It really doesn't work for a number of issues. You'll see that I'm boiling the heck out of it in my kitchen to see how to sterilize it or what will happen. Gradually, these masks improved as we learned what we could do with different machines, how that might matter. But the key thing when it comes to design is just always make a bad one first. Fight as hard as you can to get that thing into space as quickly as possible. Use cardboard, use muslin, use whatever is inexpensive and available. Use pipe cleaners just to start to understand the object, to understand the decisions that you can make. 7, I don't know where this quote comes from, but I think it's a really great idea. Every prototype is a question given a physical form. Now that I know what parameters I can change, what happens when I change them? So when we make different prototypes, we want to think about what it is that we can learn from that thing. I mean, of course, when we're making these masks in the beginning, I could have just started making from different patterns until I was blue in the face, although in the beginning there weren't that many patterns available. But that type of scattershot approach really doesn't help. When you're making a prototype, you want to come at it with a specific question and you want to isolate your variables. So if I'm trying to understand the difference between one fabric and another, I would probably use the same materials for the ties, use the different fabric for the mask, and keep the same pattern. And then I can really start to understand, oh, okay, what does changing that one parameter do? What does changing that one thing do? Prototypes should have a purpose and they should be pointed. A little bit of sewing information for you. Point number 8, let the machine do the work. If you've ever crashed a sewing machine, this is probably how you crashed it. Your hands are for turning from left to right. They're never for pushing or pulling, but sometimes they're for pushing and pulling, only in very, very specific circumstances. So for the most part, the feed system of the sewing machine is what pulls the fabric through the machine. Most of what you'll encounter is what's called a drop feed. It's the little feed dogs that come up from the bottom and kind of like pull the material forward. The machine is really good at pulling the material forward. What the machine can't do is turn the material unless it's something super cool, automated, industrial. So your hands will only ever move from left to right. You're only ever putting pressure from left to right. As you're sewing, you essentially want to move at the same speed as the machine, or even let the machine pull your hands just a little tiny bit. When you get really advanced or have a lot of knowledge, sometimes, like if you're trying to sew something that's too heavy for your machine, you might pull tension on the fabric and help the machine push it through. But for the most part, when I was teaching all of these new people to help us make masks, I found that the way that they crashed their machines was by trying to push and pull the fabric. It bends the needle, and then once the needle bends, it hits the needle plate, and then it breaks. Sometimes if it breaks really horrifically, it can bend your needle bar, and that's a relatively expensive fix. This is no Nas sewing on one of our industrial machines. What you'll notice, so she's sewing this hem here, and that hem is kind of loose, like it's folded over and there's a gap between the edge of the fabric and the fabric that's on the bed of the machine. That's because she's not pulling, she's not pushing, she's just holding the fabric in place and moving with the machine. Let the machine do the work. I'd say that's pretty good advice for any sort of machining. Goes for woodworking very much so as well. Always set the machine up for success. Sewing machines in particular are very finicky. People tend to be intimidated because they don't understand. Sewing machines aren't that finicky, you just have to do it the right way. And then if you do it the right way, it'll work every time. The most important thing is threading it correctly. Whenever I see people crash a sewing machine, yes, it definitely has to do with how they're handling the fabric, but also often it's because they've threaded it incorrectly. Second, use the right needle and make sure it's pointing in the right direction. Easier with home machines, but if you get an industrial machine, it's very easy to turn the needle around or have it slightly out of position. It's something that can go from like 1 in 10 skipped stitches to no skipped stitches just by a slight tweak. Oil your machine. For the most part, if you're not using your machine every day, and especially if you're in a cold climate or your shop tends to be a little bit cold, I actually recommend WD-40. I know many people who are watching this may be screaming, saying WD-40 is not a lubricant, but it has just enough oil to keep just enough very fine oil to keep a sewing machine going, especially if it's one that you don't use all the time. Of course, if you have an industrial machine or use your machine all the time, definitely use a sewing machine oil and frequently use WD-40 to clean it out, especially down in the bobbin area. Check for burrs. Anywhere where the thread runs over, there cannot be any burrs, and use the right attachments for your machine. Make sure you're using the right foot for the job. Make sure you're using the right foot for your machine. Make sure you have the right feed dogs and they're in the right place. Generally speaking, go with what's in the manual or shoot me an email. I'll be happy to help you out. This is the machine that I recommend. It's a Kenmore. It's a Kenmore from like the mid 80s. The serial numbers will always start with 158 or 148. All of the gears inside of it are metal. They sew straight, zigzag, pretty fast. You could attempt some leather work with this. It would be pretty questionable. Maybe okay if you use a leather needle, but it can definitely sew canvas, can definitely sew sailcloth. If you're looking at an industrial machine, this is what I would go for. I will say you don't necessarily need to have a reverse, but any good used straight stitch machine, especially from a tailor shop will do you very well. Number 10, and I just have 5 more after this, is think like the thread. Thread likes smooth, straight, clean paths. So if your tension is way out of whack, check the thread path. The guy who taught me how to work on machines, he always thought of machine maintenance and fixing machines as if it were a chess match. And the board for that chess match is usually the thread path. So you need to try and understand what is getting in the way of the machine putting that stitch together properly. So if something's going really wrong, check the thread path, especially up near the comb. Open up your machine. I think this is a common love of many people who are makers. Open up machine or buy a cheaper one and open that up. If you don't know what the inside of your machine is supposed to look like, it's really hard to know what's wrong. Download the manual, download the engineering manual, start to take it apart and put it back together. If you're looking for an inexpensive machine, go to Goodwill, buy anything, take it apart, put it back together. Bring WD-40. It's your best friend. Number 12, if you're gonna take it apart, make a video. Take pictures and make a video. Try to understand exactly what should be adjusted how and where all the parts go. While you're at it, make sure that you put all of the pieces into a cookie container. What we say is don't dance around with the screw. Every screw that you take off of the sewing machine is important. And if you drop it, you may never find it again. This is one of the most important screws on a sewing machine. It controls the tension for a bobbin case. So it essentially makes your stitch work. And that's actual size. It's about the size of 2 sesame seeds put together. 13, always batch your processes. Make your life easier. Like, you shouldn't have to pick up your scissors time after time after time. Hopefully what you're doing is you sew, and then pick everything out and trim. These are the best snips that you can buy. They're called Golden Eagle. They're about 89 cents, maybe up to $1.50. Buy them in a pack of 12 on eBay. Use them until they're gone. They sit right there. On many older industrial sewing machines, you will see that area of the bed rubbed away. That's why. I'll also highly recommend a 4-inch round knife or rotary cutter. They're all pretty much the same. We like the ones from Reliable, and the ones with the ones that are painted white, have a white casting. Those are usually what's best. This can cut up to 1 inch of fabric, but it's really useful for anyone. It's slightly dangerous. Wear a chainmail glove. Keep your fingers well away from the blade. Why? Quality starts at cutting. Make accurate patterns and cut accurately in stacks. Cut pieces hold the information about the garment, or they hold most of the information about putting together whatever it is you're trying to make. They are your pattern. They're, when you're sewing, everything that the sewing machine operator knows, I mean, besides being in their hands, is in the pattern that's in front of them. So if you don't cut well, those errors will compound and they will get worse as the sewing process goes on. 15, quality is the degree to which a product achieves the qualitative essence of its category, thereby meeting users' expectations. When we started to make these masks, I really wondered a lot, what is it that makes a quality mask? What does that mean? There are so many different ways to make it. What is it that makes the most quality mask? I asked my friend Darren Beeman over at Adrian Jewels. And he's someone who's made tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of suits in his life and has run factories. And what he explained to me is that the quality of a suit is the degree to which the suit feels like a suit. Does the fabric feel right? Does it meet what the user expects of that suit? Does it fit right? Are the armholes on the front of the chest, or are they on the side where they're supposed to be? Do you understand it? Does it make the person feel like they're wearing a suit? For a mask, of course, it's a technical piece. There are quantitative things as well. For every piece, there are quantitative. But specifically when we're talking about quality, you can meet all sorts of quantitative goals in terms of durability, weight, et cetera, but the qualitative experience is what matters when a user is trying to understand quality. And basically, is it a duck? Does it quack like a duck? Does it walk like a duck? Then it's a quality duck. Some good tool suppliers for you. Cutex, Gold Star, fantastic for attachments and machine parts. Wawak is probably where just about everyone in the world should buy their thread. eBay is a great place, especially to get those snips. Good place to find used machines. Just make sure that you can get a picture of that machine sewing. Dr. Carl is local to Rochester. If you're interested in buying an industrial machine, search Dr. Carl Sewing Machine Repair. He'll help you out. Central Penn is in the southern tier. Fantastic place to find high quality used machines. I also recommend Reliable Factory Supply, especially if you're looking for a cutting table, and Penso if you're looking for machine parts. Good fabric suppliers. Some of these are industrial, but most industrial fabric suppliers will send you short yardage for a roll down fee. All of these are fantastic. In particular, I'll shout out to So Green Rochester, fantastic supporter of the maker community, an amazing place to find inexpensive, quality, sustainable fabrics. 18, just back to the tools for a second. Get or build the biggest table that you can. A big table is big help when it comes to sewing. Keep it clean, make it about 40 inches high, and don't put your drinks on it. Power should come from the ceiling. Having something like this will really facilitate every step of the sewing process. It allows you to lay things out. Everything when it comes to making should be enjoyable. And having good organization is a key to making sure that that is the case. Organization starts with a clean workspace. A big table is a big part of that. Last but not least, I just want to go back to this idea. Making matters more with friends. Community takes many forms, but work in service of community is always better. I spent a lot of my time kind of making whatever I wanted to make. And I always enjoyed sharing that with people. But what I've chosen to do now is to work on this organization that is specifically focused on making and also making a living and sharing that and sharing what the things are that I love about my community and what the things are that I love about my profession and design and all those things. And what I found is that though the work is hard, 12,000 masks, that amount of production, especially when people need them yesterday and they need them to be perfect, that amount of work is extremely difficult. But sharing it with people can be difficult sometimes as well, but it's mostly easy and it's extremely rewarding to see people really come alive and enjoy the things that you enjoy. I'll come back to say, ask for help as well. You can email me at any time through contact@rochesterrefugee.org. You can find us at rochesterrefugee.org. We can help you with any technical design, small batch production, consumer goods, sewing questions, whatever you need help with, especially if you tell me that you came via the Maker Faire, I'll be more than happy to help you with. And also, we need your help. There are many things that we know how to do, but we definitely need help when it comes to market research, business planning, marketing, and advertising. So if you're seeing this and you have expertise in any of those fields, and you took any value from the talk that we're giving today, I would greatly appreciate you reaching out and lending us a helping hand so we can continue to do this great work. That being said, thank you very much for listening to me via Zoom. I know it's not always easy to be in front of your computer, but I hope that this was inspiring and engaging. Thank you to Dan Schneiderman and the team over at Maker Faire. The work that you do is fantastic. It's been a huge impact on my life, and I know it has on the lives of the people who are enjoying the 2020 Maker Faire as well. So thank you all very much. I really appreciate it, and I believe we may have some time for questions. Just want to see where those are coming in from. Checking over on YouTube. While I still have about 5 minutes, I would love to plug sewing, as always, as someone who has been interested in a very wide variety of making activities. Sewing is one of the deeper ones. Every single piece of it is something that you could spend years and years learning about, from the yarns in the fabric to the fiber content of the thread, to the way needles work, machines work, even different classes of machines. You could spend your entire life just working on buttonhole machines, or just working on overlock, or just working on interlock. For those of you who haven't tried sewing yet, do. Definitely do. And we at Rochester Refugee and also at So Green Rochester are very passionate about helping people become engaged in those activities. So still no questions yet. That's good. I'm glad you've learned. And this really, so what I'm getting from the panelists is that people are saying that they've learned a ton from this. I'm very glad to hear that. There is so much there, this is something that I could talk about all day and for weeks, of course, if need be. And that's part of the reason I love it so much. As someone who's tried so many different things, who's gone to Maker Faire and seen, all of the beautiful things that people can do with their tools and their mind and their hands. I found that sewing, again, is something that just there's so much to learn and there's so much to do. There's electronics, there's building jigs. You can use computer vision. You can start to understand how automated sewing works. You can also, as I've done many times, open up machines from the 50s and 60s, and you can see things that were machined before we had CAD and before we had really reliable CAM, when everything was made off of. You're welcome, Sandy. I'm very happy to pass this skill on. But opening up machines from the 50s and just wondering, how did they make that complex curve without, SolidWorks or Fusion? Like, it's absolutely unbelievable the way things were engineered in the 50s and 60s. And one of the best and fastest sewing machines, I have two of them in my shop, are from 1956. 56, 57. They're two Singer 107s. If you're interested in working on a machine, go buy a Singer 107 machine head that's not sewing, or one that is sewing. You should be able to get it for less than $300. Ideally, you can find those for $50. If you call an industrial sewing machine supplier, most of them are throwing them out. But it's a Singer 107 W1 or W2, preferably a W1. Singer 107 W1, take it apart and you'll learn everything about how a lock stitch, especially a lock stitch zigzag machine works. And everything in there is like, it's all handmade, hand polished. And it's just a truly beautiful thing. I got an old machine that I inherited. What should I do to get it in good shape? Hit it with a bunch of WD-40. Start turning the hand wheel. Everything that moves, spray it down. Take it outside. Don't start it too soon after that because the machine might spark. So hit it with some WD-40, get it moving. Most old machines are just seized. Then see if you can get it sewing. Make sure that you download the manual. Make sure that you have wound your bobbin correctly. Always make sure that your bobbin is going in the right way. There's so much to say about how to get a machine like that running. Honestly, just email me, tell me what it is. We can set up a Zoom call and I'll show you how to get into it. The basic idea is get it moving and thread it properly. Get the right needles for it. And then you can pretty easily bring it back to life. Every once in a while, you'll have to clean the brushes on the motor. And that can be very, very helpful, especially if it's not too powerful. That's a great way to get a machine. These days, you should really only pay $50 to $100 for a home sewing machine. Get one from Goodwill. Basic sewing machine. Oh, that's all the time we have. Yes, buy a serger. Buy a serger. And goodbye. Take care, everybody. Enjoy your day.